After writing 2 transformational books myself and supporting many other beings to do the same, I've become enthralled by the deep and mysterious magic that's activated when we choose to say yes to ourselves and commit to the book writing journey. Of course, we want to inspire change and new perspectives in our readers, but the transformation that happens as an author, both throughout the writing process and by actually releasing your book into the world, is surprisingly potent. I know I've been blindsided in the most disruptive and delicious ways by some of the changes my books have brought into my life. Writing a book is like casting a spell. Although we can never be completely sure what's going to be unleashed during the process, we choose to do it anyway. This Unbound one is a heroic journey. Each book has the potential to be a magical portal, a doorway to a new world, both for you and your reader. Each book has a very specific medicine that it's here to share with us. And each book gives us the opportunity to alchemize the magnificent imperfection of our experience into gold. The truth is that anyone can write a book. We could all get a few thousand words down and put them together. But what fascinates me is what happens when we allow the book writing process to go deeper. When we say, fuck it, get naked and dive way down beneath the surface. Letting go of the shoulds and any need to be acceptable, sensible, or approved of. What fascinates me is what happens when we make ourselves fully available to being transformed by the very act of writing a book. This is Unbound Writing, and this is the process we'll be exploring together here in the Unbound Writers Club. I'm Nicola, author and founder of the Unbound Press, and I help magical beings to write the transformational book they're really here to write at this time. I'm your guide here in the Unbound Writers Club, and the aim of this podcast is to help you to feel supported, encouraged, activated as you embark on your book writing journey. Whether you're a first-time author or have many books out in the world, my hope is that you will find something here to inspire you. Let's dive in. Hello and welcome to the Unbound Writers Club. I am excited to be in your earbuds today, or wherever I am. And at the beginning of the year, over in my Get Book Ready free Facebook group, I asked the question, what do you want to hear about on the pod? Questions do you want me to answer? What do you want me to speak into? And one of the questions was, what do you wish you had known at the beginning of your book writing journey? And this is such a great question. And I knew that I wanted to answer it. I needed a little bit of time to feel into, actually, what do I wish I'd known? And that's what I'm going to be sharing with you today. And as I kind of gave that question some space, there are quite a few things. There are 8 things actually that came pretty much immediately to mind when I thought, Nicola, back in 2015, when I first began the process of writing Heal You're in a Good Girl, which was my first book. What do I wish that 2015 Nicola had known? And there's probably more than these 8 things that I'm going to be sharing with you today. But these are the ones that immediately came to mind. And I think it's going to be really powerful to share them with you, because if you're at the beginning of your book writing journey, or even if you're a way into it, even if you have books out in the world, I think it's so helpful to be reminded of what the process is actually like what is actually going on when we are writing, when we are creating our books. It's so much more than we know or can imagine. So what do I wish I'd known back in 2015? The first thing that immediately came to mind is I feel like I was approaching the writing process of Heal You're in a Good Girl in a really limited way, which is interesting because that's the book where the idea of the unbound self first came through. But I had no idea just how transformational the process of writing a book could be. I was approaching it in like quite a, not formulaic, although that word is coming to mind. It was a little bit, because all of the advice I could see out there was, just plan out what your book's going to be and just write it from start to finish, put it out there, like take your people through this step-by-step process. That's kind of what I did. I mean, I love Heal You're in a Good Girl. So many people have read it and loved it and found it really powerful. It is a deeply transformational book. And also, like, I had no idea at that time how to really consciously invite in the energy of transformation for me as the author when I was in the process of birthing a book. I had no idea how much of a magical portal a book could be, like for you as the author. So, I very much saw it as a process of writing, of course. Didn't quite realize how much more it was than just sitting down to write a book. And that if I allowed myself to go on a transformational journey as I was writing a book, which I did with the books that came afterwards, very much so, that like it would really impact the potency of the experience, not just for me, but for the reader as well. So I wish I'd known just how transformational it could be, how much of a magical portal each book could be. But, I needed to have the experience of writing it in the way that I did so that I could access what was to come next. But yeah, that was one of the things that immediately came to mind. The second thing that came to mind was that the book writing process could be non-linear. So I think many of us have this expectation that when we're writing a book, it's like if you're writing a social media post or a blog post or an email, that you write it from start to finish, like you start at the beginning and work your way through to the end. And, we approach our books like that. It's like, okay, I'm going to start at the beginning of my book and then I'm going to write it in sequence through to the end. And actually that can be incredibly limiting as well, because, we're not always able to do that. Like often we don't know exactly what sequence our book is going to be in. And like we might not want to write it in that way. Like each day or, each time you come to the page or to your laptop, you won't necessarily want to write what's next. Maybe you feel called to write about something that comes like later on in the book, or, you'll come. And very often what I found is like when I'm towards the end of my book, I want to go back and revisit the beginning, write something for the beginning, because I'm so much clearer about what the book is actually going to be and the journey I'm taking my reader on. So giving myself permission for it to be a completely non-linear process, and to recognize there will be many times when I don't know what's next. Like I don't know exactly what the book's meant to be. I wish Nicola in 2015 had known that, because I think my expectation that I needed to write it in this linear way really limited my perception of what a book could be. The third thing that I wish I had known, which I kind of knew in a way, but was about the power of community. So I already had a community when I was writing my first book, Heal You're in a Good Girl. I'd already started like an Unbound Facebook group. I had an email list that I'd been growing since, I think, 2012, 2013. I had a small following on like Facebook mainly. I think, I had kind of recently started to use Instagram as well. So I did have like some kind of community, but I didn't really take my people on the journey with me as I was writing that first book. I was talking about it a little bit, but if I had to go back, I would do that in a much more intentional way. Like I would share much more of what was coming through. I would share much more of, what the process of writing the book was like. I would really invite my people more into, like, take them more behind the scenes, invite them into the process, like ask them to be part of it. Like I say, it's not that I didn't do this at all. I did, but I would do it a lot more. Actually, as I'm talking about all of these things, I feel like I'm reminding myself now, as I'm in the process of writing or bringing together my fourth book, The Abundant Author, like, to be aware of all of these things. So the third thing is that I wish I'd known more about the power of community. The fourth thing is kind of more of a logistical thing, but once I got to the point where I'd completed the manuscript and I had an idea of when I wanted the release date to be, started to go into the editing process and the design process, I kind of left like the minimum amount of time, I think, before the release date. And I wish I'd left more time. Like, I pretty much wish that I don't do this every time I release my own book. And I'm definitely reminding myself of this one for The Abundant Author. But it can often end up feeling really rushed, even though we feel like we've left enough time, like, to go through the publishing process, like, however you are approaching that. I feel we can all benefit by allowing it to be more spacious. And I know I felt this and I feel this myself with, each of my books. It's like, but I want it to be out there. Like, it's complete. It looks amazing, when whichever designer I'm working with has worked their magic. It's like, I want it to be in people's hands. But also there's something about, like, allowing ourselves as the authors to really honor the process of birthing our books fully into the world, and to give our books a bit of space, and to, actually create some momentum around the launch. Now, as I say that, like, it doesn't all have to, like, happen around the launch date. Like, you can put your book out in the world and then focus on, like, creating momentum around it and sharing it, like, in the days, weeks, months, years afterwards. Again, this is not a linear process, but I know that pretty much always with each of my books, I felt pretty rushed around the release date. And I know that happens for a lot of our authors at the Unbound Press as well, because we're very much author-led. And, I always want to try and accommodate any particular date that an author has in mind for their release. And I feel we could all leave a bit more space. Saying that, things can always crop up at the last minute. So you could leave all the space in the world and still you might feel like you're rushing towards the end. So, I kind of taking that one with a pinch of salt. But I wish certainly with the first book, Heal You're in a Good Girl, I wish I could go back and go, Nick, like, you don't have to release it immediately. Like, give yourself a couple of months. Like, you can still, have copies of the book, like, preview copies that you share with people or sell to people even. But the official release, like, give yourself a couple of months for that. Yeah, once everything is done and, is good to go. So that's the fourth thing. The fifth thing, which again is around the launch of the book, is I wish I'd known, like, not to get so hung up on book sales, because people don't really talk about book sales, like how many copies you might actually sell. So I think a lot of us, especially with our first books, can have this sense that, we're going to sell thousands of copies, because we see all of these authors, like, on the bestseller list, like the Liz Gilberts and, I don't know, Marianne Williamson and, all of these authors that we think, wow, look at them. Look how many copies of their book. We don't know how many copies of the books that they're selling, but we imagine, and obviously someone like Liz Gilbert is selling a huge amount of copies of her book, or, whoever it might be. But in reality, like, that's not going to be the case for many authors of transformational books. So I had this expectation that I would put my book out there and it would be selling like hundreds, thousands of copies maybe. And in reality, I can't remember how many books, Heal Your Inner Good Girl sold initially. Maybe it was around 100. I'm not sure. And, it's gone on to sell consistently since. But I remember that feeling of disappointment. And like even with Unbound, like I thought, oh, well, Unbound's going to be bigger because I've grown more of a community. And, I was publishing with a hybrid publisher, like similar model to the Unbound Press. And I knew the score a bit more. So I did think, and I'd been talking about Unbound more during the writing process. And it did sell more copies initially than Heal You're in a Good Girl. But still, I think we have like these lofty expectations, which, I say go for it. Like there is limitless potential, but it's not all about book sales. We don't want to get hung up on book sales. And this is something that I'm talking about. That's the whole premise of the next book, The Abundant Author, is like your book gets to be a seed that you plant and it gets to flourish into so much more than just being a book. Like you get to create other offerings around it. It gets to bring new people into your world. Like it creates a seed within them that gets to flourish into something else. Like there's so much more potential than simply focusing on book sales, because in reality, like the income you receive from a book it's not going to be a huge amount. Like the royalties you receive by the time there being print costs and retailer fees, like it's not going to be a huge amount. So don't get hung up on the book sales. And I wish 2015 Nicola had known that. Also, following on from that, what number is this? This is the sixth thing. I wish that I had known that, or been prepared for, that most people just won't be into your book. Like we have this imagination that like you're going to release a book and everyone will be like, wow, like Nicola's just released a book. I need to go and buy it immediately. And we can also have this this fear that like everyone we've ever known will end up buying our book. And, some of those people may end up being judgy and criticizing it, or we're going to get loads of negative comments. And the truth is, like, your book feels like a massive thing for you. It is a massive thing for you. And it will be a big thing for, like, the people your book is for. But there will be so many people, the majority of people, that are just like, oh, well, well done. But so many of the people that I imagined would be, like, buying and reading my book were just like, no. And I was watching a training, like a book launch training by Laura Belgray recently, who is one of my favorite writers. And she said a very similar thing, like people who are close to her, who she expected would be like really super supportive, like buy her book, like be sharing about it, be really into it. There was nothing, crickets. So I think it's quite liberating to realize that. It's like, your book, yes, it is a big thing. It's a big thing for you as the author. It's a big thing, like I say, for, the people that it's for, the readers who are kind of waiting for it to be birthed into the world. But for most people, it's just not that much of a big deal. It's like that thing, we go through life imagining that everyone, like we're the focus of everyone's attention and being really conscious of that. And we're just not. And our books aren't. But that is a brilliant thing, because then we get to be much freer with it and know that it will make its way into the hands of the people who really need to read it and to connect with your book and to connect with you. And also sometimes, particularly with these transformational, like pioneering books, people aren't always ready for them. I know, like with some of my books, particularly with like Unbound writing, some of the people that I imagined would read it immediately maybe haven't read it for a couple of years. Like people just need to be in this state of receptivity for your book. But just know, most people probably won't be into it. And that's okay. It's a brilliant thing. The seventh thing that I wish I had known is how, like, each book that you get to write is so, so different. I don't just mean in terms of content, obviously, but the personality of each book and the writing process for each book is so different. because I think I had this idea that after Heal You're in a Good Girl, like pretty soon afterwards, I knew that I wanted to write Unbound. I didn't know what that book was going to be, but I knew that the title was Unbound, and it was around the theme of living in a more unbound way and embracing your unbound self. But I thought it would unfold in pretty much the same way as Heal You're in a Good Girl, like 6 months writing process, like it'd be out in the world the next year, but nah. You know, that was a much more transformational process. Like Unbound was just so much wilder than Heal You're in a Good Girl. The energy of it, the personality of the book was so much different. And again, like Unbound writing was a completely different energy to Unbound. Obviously, it had the energy of Unbound in it in a way, because I was talking about an unbound approach to writing your book. But, you know, it was a much more, I don't know, just felt much more kind of grounded in a way. And the writing process for each one, like I said, has been completely different. And I wish that I had known that back then, because I think I made myself wrong at times, because it's like, but this isn't happening in the same, like, pretty straightforward way that it did with Heal You're in a Good Girl. But the thing is, again, like, we grow into the author, the transformational author we're here to be with each book. So each book will give us like the medicine that we need to have, that we need to take in order to grow into the author we're here to be. So of course, it's going to be a different process with each one. And I wish I had known that. And the final thing, the eighth thing that I wish I'd known, back in 2015, when I was writing Here We Were in a Good Girl, in 2016, when it was coming out into the world, and I had all of these expectations, like this, you know, this is going to change everything. It's going to change my life. It's going to change my business. I wish I'd known. And that was literally like just the beginning. And there was no way, this kind of goes back to the first point, like the magical portal. There is no way I could have imagined what writing that first book was going to lead to. Like, there's no way I can imagine now, you know, what else is going to be created through the process of writing my books. But really, I wish I had known that, like, that first book, Here You're in a Good Girl, it literally was like planting a seed, like going through the process of writing it and publishing it. That was simply planting a seed. I thought it was the kind of end, like the culmination of something, but it was just the beginning of like so much more magic that was about to unfold. Not immediately. And this is the thing, we can be like, feel like anticlimactic once our books are out there. It's like, oh, is that it? You don't know what is going on under the surface once you've allowed yourself to go through that process. Like, look what that initial book has grown into, like this publishing community of the Unbound Press, and so many other, you know, other books apart from my own, like all of these books that are making their way into the world, all of these incredible authors who are activating transformation in different ways. Like, if you told me that back then, I would have been like, what are you talking about? No way. So I wish I'd known it was just the beginning. So there we go. That is a taste of what I wish I'd known when I began my book writing journey back in 2015. If there's anything that bubbles up for you, if there's anything that you wish you'd known earlier on, I'd love you to let me know. Like, I'm sure there's more for me, but these are the things that came up immediately. So do like connect with me. Come find me on Instagram. That's the best place. I'm at Nicola Humber. Or if you are in one of my Facebook communities, like let me know over there what bubbles up for you around this. And yeah, I'm sure, but I know there is more learning to come. Like, it's all, every day's a school day, especially when you're writing a book. Oh, so yeah, I hope you found that helpful. Maybe it sparked off something, like some kind of new awareness for you, which is going to feel supportive. That is my intention. And I will be back with you again soon for another episode of the Unbound Writers Club. What do you do when you want to write a book, but the usual approaches are leaving you feeling restricted, pressurized, not at all enough, and pretty dry, to be honest, you find another way, of course. And if you are listening to this, my free unconventional book writing guide is going to be perfect for you. It's designed especially for soul-led coaches, healers, and mentors who want to write a transformational book without spending hours on end chained to a desk. In it, I'm giving you my unique spin on the top 10 questions I hear from would-be authors, and it's going to help you liberate the way you write forever. Download your free copy of the guide now over at nicolahumber.com/10, the number 10, 10 hyphen questions.